Day 119, when bitterness becomes a casket and buries your favor. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 30, Amplified Classic. A calm and undisturbed mind and a heart are the life and health of the body, but envy, jealousy, and wrath are like rottenness of the bones. One of the most sobering truths Jesus pointed out is that bitterness doesn't simply live inside you, it eventually buries you. The sycamore tree he referenced in Luke 17 was the wood commonly used to build caskets. In other words, bitterness becomes the lumber that envy uses to build a coffin around your future, and especially God's favor in your life. Where favor breathes life, bitterness tries to suffocate it. It will try to seal the shut doors that God has opened. It will try to paralyze the promotions coming in your life. And it will also try to trap you in the past where favor wants to accelerate your future. A calm, undisturbed heart, Proverbs says, is life to the body. In other words, peace and forgiveness create the atmosphere where favor thrives and healing thrives. But when a heart becomes disturbed, offended, envious, or hardened, it becomes spiritually toxic. Favor suffocates where bitterness becomes dominant. You see, favor cannot operate inside a confined heart. Favor needs space, room to work. It grows best in a heart that's yielded, soft, and surrendered to forgiveness. The moment you allow bitterness to take root, it begins to close your spirit inward, and favor is always outward. Favor moves you forward. Favor pushes you towards destiny. Favor opens pathways you should enter on your own. But bitterness will tighten the walls of your heart until every blessing feels too small and every opportunity feels unreachable. You cannot walk in the largeness of God's purpose with a small, bitter heart. And bitter feels justified, but it's always poison. Many times bitterness comes dressed in the clothing of "I deserve to feel this way." And truthfully, many wounds are real, deep, unjust, and very painful. Someone really did betray you. They really did lie. They did misuse your trust and your love and your sacrifice. And you're not imagining the hurt. Bitterness takes what is real and will turn it into poison. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 15 warns us from the Amplified Classic, lest any root of resentment, rancor, bitterness, or hatred shoots forth and causes trouble and bitter torment, and the many become contaminated and defiled by it. Bitterness never remains contained. It spreads into everything. It'll contaminate your attitude and conversations, your expectations, your favor that God is wanting to work in your life, and ultimately your faith. It becomes a spiritual rottenness in your bones, and bones represent structure. Bitterness weakens your structure for receiving and carrying the future God is trying to birth in you, because bitterness buries favor's opportunities. There's a reason Satan fights so hard to get believers offended. He knows that bitterness blinds you to open doors God has already placed in your path. I've watched families and churches and friendships and business relationships bury decades of favor and love because of one moment of offense. And I cannot count how many times I've heard someone say, "I don't talk to them anymore," over situations smaller than a teaspoon. Favor is relational. Favor flows through unity, love, and connection. But the moment bitterness sets in, relational favor shuts down. When my father went home to be with the Lord, my brother and I had to settle the estate. We walked into the probate office, and the clerks were braced for war. They had seen siblings claw, fight, and bite over furniture and guns and pictures and pennies. But my dad had written in his will, "Do not argue," and we honored it. In fact, we almost began to argue about who would take stuff only because we kept saying, "You have it." We honored his heart, and it was amazing the favor that flowed. We experienced favor that day, supernatural favor. The clerk bent rules she normally wouldn't. And what should have taken weeks took minutes. Why? Because our hearts were free of contention. Bitterness is a blessing block, and favor flows where unity rules. Think about this. Jesus says bitterness is like a tree, the sycamore tree, whose wood builds coffins. But God says your life is called, chosen, appointed, and favored. So you have two questions. Climb into that coffin bitterness builds, or step into the calling favor produces. But remember this, you can't do both. Favor requires forgiveness, release, and freedom in your heart. I've seen people talk themselves into the coffin of bitterness over situations long past. Careers buried, marriages buried, friendships buried, ministries buried, and ultimately favor buried. Don't let your destiny be buried in a coffin someone else's mistakes built, because you are too favored to live bitter. Romans chapter 6 verse 21 says, this is from the New King James Version, "What fruit did you have then in the things of which you are now ashamed? For the end of these things is death. Bitterness always leads to death, but forgiveness always leads to life, and life more abundantly that Jesus promised. And in that abundant life is favor. Favor that will lift you, restore what was lost. God will bring divine connections. He'll give you influence. He will open up doors of divine opportunity. He will multiply and harvest your seed, protect you, and according to Psalms 5, His favor will surround you like a shield. You cannot afford to bury that beneath resentment, because favor was paid for with too great a price. Make this confession with me. In Jesus' name, I refuse to let bitterness build a casket around my future. I release every grievance, every hurt, every betrayal, and every offense. My heart belongs to Jesus, and my heart makes room for favor. I choose forgiveness so I can freely walk in God's grace, His blessing and increase. I declare that I am alive to God, alive to His destiny, and alive to His favor. And no root of bitterness will bury what God is building in my life. In Jesus' name, amen.